You're listening to For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation.
Hello there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation. I am one of your co-hosts, Andrew, and I am so excited to get this started finally. I've had this in mind for the longest time, and I am so excited to bring this to life. We are all Star Wars fans here. We've loved Star Wars for, in my case, as long as I can remember. I literally have no memories where Star Wars is not a factor in my life, but recently, at least for me, the animated stuff has always been a main source of passion for me. And we'll talk about everything Star Wars, but the main thing we're going to be doing here is we're going to be going through the Clone Wars animated series to start off with and go arc by arc talking about the big themes that stick out to us, what we liked, maybe what we didn't like, but we're mainly going to be focusing on why animation is such a great medium for Star Wars storytelling. But I'm not alone here on this journey. Joining me we've got Connor, we've got Jake, and we've got Don. Introduce yourselves, guys. How are you?
What's up, guys? Yeah, I'm good. I'm happy to talk the Clone Wars movie. Probably one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars content.
Yep, I'm Jake. I would honestly feel the same way. I freaking love this movie.
I'm Donovan. This is actually kind of an interesting experience for me because I haven't seen the Clone Wars movie in years, and I had somewhat of a negative opinion of it previously, and this is actually like the most fun I've had watching the movie in forever. So it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience that I'll get into once we get to the main discussion, but I have been pretty negative. I mean, the show itself I adore, but I've been pretty negative on this movie for at least since I started my first watch of the show a couple years ago. But watching this back and actually like getting some stuff ready to analyze, it was a lot more enjoyable than I was expecting. But before we start off, another thing that I want to focus on here is not only our love for Star Wars, but what made us have that love for Star Wars, what brought us to become a part of this fandom, and what really got us in love with the franchise. So something I want to do is whenever we have a new person on this show, a guest or a co-host or something, I want to ask them, what was the thing that made you a fan? What was your earliest memory with the franchise? So if we want to just go around real quick and just tell a quick story before we get to the movie, whoever wants to start off.
I'll start. So my Star Wars story, it's pretty fragmented, at least early on. I think about 4 or 5, I remember watching really the action bits of Phantom Menace, specifically Duel of the Fates, and Return of the Jedi, specifically the Battle of Endor and the battle above the pit of Carkoon. And I kind of just really got into it through that. I grew up with the special editions, so like pretty much everything in them I'm cool with. And then saw Revenge of the Sith at 8 years old, cried my eyes out at Order 66, as one should. And I started to get into the Clone Wars. I remember my nostalgia for the Clone Wars is actually the first season, specifically the first few arcs and a bit of season 2. I had a friend, like I'm sure all of us had like that one Star Wars friend we hung out with, and that really, really, really got us into Star Wars. He and I haven't chatted about Star Wars in forever. He became one of those like Legends people. No disrespect to him, but like it's not what I vibe with. But he still was a big part of my Star Wars foundation. Watched Clone Wars, when I was in middle school, and then I kind of just fell out of it. Oh no, I also Complete Saga Lego game, really good. Really, really, really made me love the prequels
Oh, for
a
sure.
lot more than I thought I would. Specifically, Attack of the Clones, which is my favorite Star Wars movie.
Also has the best missions in that game.
Camino, incredible.
Amazing.
And Geonosis too.
Yep.
Fell out of Star Wars, not because I didn't hate it or anything. It was just because high school and cross country just took up all the time. And so running was my Star Wars for about 5 years. I was still into it, but not as passionately as I am now. And then freshman year of college was 2016 for me. Rogue One came out. That was honestly my reintroduction into Star Wars, because it was a movie set. It was a non-Skywalker saga movie that helped expand the universe and characters. And so in that case, I was like, ooh, this is interesting. This is very EU-like to me. And so now I'm just a huge proponent of the extended canon material since then. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Okay, I can go next. I will never forgive my father for this, but he had me watch Return of the Jedi first. That was the first one that I watched.
Ooh,
What?
just ruins the whole thing, right?
What the
Yeah.
hell?
Now you know
okay.
how this ends. No problem.
It was sort of an accident, honestly. He was watching it, and I was like 5, and I was like, "Ooh, what's that? That looks cool." He's like, "Star Wars," and we watched it. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I want to watch more." He's like, "Okay." But yeah, so we quickly watched the rest thereafter. So it was right before Revenge of the Sith was coming out, because I remember I had just been like fresh off of watching all the other ones when Revenge of the Sith was releasing, and my mom had heard that it was too scary for kids, and so I never got to go see that one in theaters, even though I wanted to really, really bad. Another thing I'll never forgive my mother for never letting me see that one in theaters, but I obviously was hooked instantly. So I was like living off of like the 2003 Clone Wars animated show. That was like my thing. I had both volumes of those on DVD, and I would watch it all the time. And then like when the Clone Wars show came out and movie, obviously that was like my big thing for the longest time. And then sort of similar to Connor, I sort of let like my Star Wars obsession fall on the back burner for a little bit, until when I was like 15 or 16, I accidentally let it slip some like really obscure random fact about the Clone Wars to my entire hockey team. And they're like, "How the hell do you know that?" And I was like, "No reason at all that I know this really, really random thing." And from there, I just kind of let it blossom fully. Sort of like Connor too. Rogue One was really more my reintroduction back into Star Wars, more so than The Force Awakens was, just because like I only saw The Force Awakens once in theaters. I honestly didn't love it. I watched it like once when it came out on physical months later, and then that was kind of it up until like the Rogue One hype. And then like by the time Rogue One had come out, that was when I had my car. I was literally driving to the theater every single day after school to go watch that movie. And obviously from there it's just gotten worse. All I do is Star Wars now. I went to Star Wars Celebration in 2019 and really wish I could go this year, but COVID. But yeah, now I'm on a freaking podcast. So obviously I have an unhealthy obsession with Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't even like, just the thought of Celebration just gets me upset, because I have had those tickets for 3 years at this point, and I can't go because I
refunded mine right off the bat because I was like, "There's no
I should
way
have done that." But I was like, "Oh, it's in August, right?" And they're like, "Nope, it's May." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I can't go." And I've been holding off until like the last time, and it's like, "No, they're on sale again, so they're not gonna move it." And I'm like, "I gotta sell these." So hopefully I'll be able to do that. But
we'll see y'all in 2024. Am I right?
Yeah,
I hope so.
That sounds about right. Year.
I hope
the only good thing is I am in the process of booking a Galaxy's Edge trip, so that is my substitute celebration.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Don, if you want to go, and then I'll round things off before we get to the main course.
Yeah, sure. So okay, so like I've been a Star Wars fan since I was like 6 years old. My parents rented The Phantom Menace on VHS from Blockbuster, uh, and they screened it that night because they wanted to make sure it would be suitable for me to watch. Because I scared easily as a kid with some things. And and I remember sneaking downstairs because I couldn't sleep that night, and I snuck downstairs and I watched about half of the movie with them both, and I remember just being transfixed by everything, the pod race, the blasters, the lightsabers, all of it, and I was just like so enamored with this movie and this universe that like the next day I woke up in the morning in my pajamas. It was the weekend, so I was like, I just watched the whole thing immediately again all the way through because I was just like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And I just carried on from there. I watched through the entire original trilogy later that year. I was bowled over by it. I went to see Attack of the Clones for my 8th birthday in 2002, and I went to see Revenge of the Sith, and I remember feeling this kind of like this almost kind of sadness that this really huge thing that had just like it bowled me over was ending. And so the Clone Wars was kind of this kind of important thing in a way, because it was keeping the flame alive of Star Wars in a sense, like just sustaining it right up until like the sequel films came along and revived that. Because like I remember going to see Force Awakens in 2015 and just feeling the chills that like came from seeing the logo come back and all of that. And it's been great to kind of get deeper and deeper into the universe and like meet people and share perspectives on everything. So yeah, it's all been very dope.
Awesome. All right, so with me, I gotta thank everything and why I became this, Star Wars dork that I am, all because of my grandfather. When I was like, it had to have been 4 or 5 years old, because it was sometime after Attack of the Clones came out, but I don't know if it was like right after or like a couple years before. I mean after, but he showed me the original trilogy on VHS, and I was hooked from that moment, and it just became my entire life. I got really big into the figure collecting aspect, which I know Jake and I have in common. But that was really big when I was a kid. But it was always one of those things where I would go and I would never have the characters that made sense. Like I didn't have an Anakin my entire childhood, but I'd have like 80 clone troopers and a bunch.
You'd had a lot of Glup Shitos.
Yeah, I'm like I could never find an Anakin, but
the best figures are the Glup Shitos though.
I had so many clone figures as a kid. It's nuts.
But then the lead up to Revenge of the Sith is really what I have a lot of nostalgia for, because I did grow up in the prequel era. The originals were what hooked me and I love them, but like the prequels were just as much as my like love for Star Wars in my childhood. Those were my movies. And then I still have like the teaser trailer for Revenge of the Sith. Like it's permanently ingrained in my memory. Is
this the one with Obi-Wan, with A New Hope Obi-Wan?
Yeah,
Vader was seduced by the dark side.
Right. It's such a badass trailer.
I still think that's my favorite Star Wars trailer of all time. Like I still have that hooked. And then the problem is there's a gap in my memory somewhere, because I don't remember if I saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters first or if we had to wait until it came out on DVD. But I just remember the first, I do remember the experience. I just don't remember where it was. And I just remember like seeing Order 66 for the first time, and Anakin's fall. It's all like, it's a movie that's forever stuck with me. And then the Lego games and everything was just, that was my childhood for the longest time. I remember playing the hell out of that first Lego Star Wars game. And then I remember like we didn't have Wi-Fi in my house for the longest time. I don't think we got like a stable Wi-Fi connection until like 2007, 2008, if that. So I remember like for the first time going on like I think I looked up like one of the prequel battles on YouTube, and I remember all the comments were, "Yo, these movies are terrible," like because it was prime like the prequels suck era.
Prime prequel hate, baby.
And I just remember being
I'm so glad
like,
I missed that.
I remember being so like, wait, what? Because those were my like childhood. Everyone at my school loved those movies. I loved those movies. So
I
was
just
just
the same.
I know. So I was just so like thrown off that there was like at the time it was like the number one cool thing was to hate the prequels. Wow, it's almost like things repeat over time, and that just threw me off. But then the Clone Wars movie came out, and that one I actually did see in theaters. So there's a chance that what we're going to be talking about is my first theatrical Star Wars experience ever. And then I watched like the first season, maybe a bit into the second, because I remember watching some Cad Bane stuff when it first came out. And then I just don't know why I just stopped. Like I always just loved Star Wars, but I didn't keep up with Clone Wars. Like I remember we had those like book fairs when we were a kid, and they had a Clone Wars book, and like Savage was on the cover. I'm like, who the hell is that?
Those
like
books. Oh my god,
who is that? Like
Savage
mall pretender?
Oh my god!
And then I remember,
right? He's a mall pretender.
Yeah. And then I remember seeing like the announcements. It's like Darth Maul is back. I'm like, what? And then that was like right around the time of Phantom Menace 3D, which I wish I saw in theaters. And I then I got a bit back into it, and then I will always remember the day that it was announced that Lucasfilm got purchased by Disney, and then that just started a whole bunch of discussions with my friends, because we'd always have those hypothetical like, what if they did, you know, in Episode 9, and that live action series that Lucas was working on was always like a big discussion topic. Like, what are we going to see in this show? And then like right around the lead up to Force Awakens, I just became like this is just my life now. And I just embraced it. And I was known as, you know, the guy that likes Star Wars in high school, which I was fine with my junior and senior year. What better way to go out?
Yep,
and
I
now
was known as the Star Wars guy in college.
And now we're here at that point. I started rewatching Clone Wars like in the lead to Force Awakens, and now I'm hosting a podcast about it. So, you know, it's just being shown those VHS tapes, God, almost 20 years ago at this point. Actually, I think 20 years ago exactly. And here we are now. It has taken over my life. Before we get started onto our dive into the Clone Wars, I want to make a quick shout out to the Amidala Initiative, a collaborative community campaign to raise funds for Texas LGBTQ youth that are at risk for these harmful new bills that are going on, just to support and advocate for those families that are struggling in this time. It's a cause that all of us here at For the Republic care about a lot. We hate what's going on right now with all these harmful bills that are impacting LGBTQ youth, and this initiative is run by Star Wars fan creators, and I think it's a perfect cause to match with our first episode of the show. So I will leave a link to their Twitter and their GoFundMe in the podcast description, and definitely check them out. It's a cause that you should all definitely support. It was nice to go down memory lane there, but now we can get into the Clone Wars movie itself, which came out in 2008. This was our first Star Wars content we had in 3 years, because George was like, Revenge of the Sith is it. You're never getting anything ever again, except this. And I remember being, when this first came out, I remember being confused, because we had the 2D Clone Wars show, which I know is one of Jake's favorite things of all time.
Goated.
Yeah, and
It's really good.
I missed it when I was a kid. It was one of my like knowledge gaps. But I remember seeing like merch for it and like random like scholastic books for it and stuff. But I remember hearing that this Clone Wars movie was coming out. And one of my memories for this is also related to figure collecting, because I remember seeing, I think it was some Clone Wars figures on the shelf, and I got a clone because I already had about 40 of them, but I need the new model, obviously, and an R2. And I remember one of them said, get this, and you can mail in for a Captain Rex. And I was like, who the heck is Captain Rex? My 10-year-old brain had no idea who this guy was, but I got it. I mailed it in, and that was mail-in figures are really like a thing of like the 70s and the 80s. You really don't hear about that like at all anymore because it's just like such a like old concept. But that was my one experience for it. A lot of the older Star Wars generation, like I think there was that, I'm forgetting the name of that documentary that came out a couple years ago, but there was all the talk about that mail-in Boba Fett that was like a big talking point. That was my mail-in Boba Fett, was this Captain Rex. And then
Except that Captain Rex doesn't sell for $200,000.
yeah, it doesn't sell.
Now.
It's not the most valuable piece of Star Wars merchandise anymore. That's just the Lego set that I realized I had that sells for almost 400 that we figured out before we started recording this. I'm not making that now. And I just remember we were on a vacation. My grandma and we were going to Massachusetts, I think, for some like baseball thing when I was 10. And we stopped on the ride there and saw the Clone Wars movie, which I was like, holy crap, we're going to see Star Wars? And I just remember being like, okay, here's Anakin and Obi-Wan again. And I was trying to figure out, like, where does this take place? Because they look like the Revenge of the Sith stuff, but this is supposed to be like right after Attack of the Clones. But I remember enjoying it when I was a kid. And then I think we stopped in McDonald's afterwards and they had the Clone Wars toys and they were just really shitty. They just had like the big heads and like a little tiny ship. But I think my grandma was like, all right, do you have all of them? And they were like, yeah. It's like, all right, we'll take them. So I have that entire Clone Wars still in my storage room. So that was my memory with this for the longest time. But then I did not have positive thoughts about this movie for the longest time. I thought it was really boring. I did not care for, I mean, I love Ahsoka now. She is in my top 5 probably of all time. I just adore the character. I did not like her at first, and we'll get into some stuff why, but rewatching this, it's the most I've enjoyed it since then. Like I said, I don't know if I still love it as a movie, but as a introductory arc, I think it really does the job. So I think I've talked
Okay,
about
random side note, I just found out that Shmi Skywalker is playable in the Lego Skywalker Saga, which is great, because I can beat the shit out of Palpatine and Shmi Skywalker. Let's go!
There we go.
That is the best news I've heard regarding that game. That is amazing.
Well, I also heard that shirtless Ben Solo is a playable character.
Oh, there we go.
But when are we going to get to play as Qui-Gon Jinn, though?
Qui-Gon Jinn.
Like Ben Swallow and Qui-Gon Jinn teaming up with Shmi Skywalker to beat the shit out of Palpatine.
Beat the shit out of Palpatine twice.
That sounds good to me.
So hyped for that game. I think I might just do an entire episode just on that game when it comes out.
We should.
We might have to. Or
that
at
would
least
be dope.
that's gonna be at least a discussion topic.
We got to do 2. We're gonna have to do 2 episodes.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be
like it's supposed to be like massive.
Yeah, I'm like, I saw that trailer they put out a couple months ago. I'm like, why does this look like the most like best like open world Star Wars game we've ever had?
I was gonna say, it's literally open world, yeah.
I'm like, oh, you can go to all these planets. I'm like, why is this so cool? Like, this is no right to be as good.
The first ever Star Wars game to have space to planet side combat.
Oh, that's
I'm
amazing.
gonna just ascend.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, now
it's porn. It's straight up just.
Yes.
Now
I don't know what else to call it.
Commenced.
Now I know why it took 5 years to freaking release.
We have to change the first episode title to just discussion about the Lego Star Wars. We're not talking about the Clone Wars
We're
movie
not
anymore.
talking about the Clone Wars. Sorry, guys. We started and then the Shmi news broke, and that's all we talked about here. But
Shmi news.
I mean, we obviously talked about what our first experiences with Clone Wars were, but
I don't remember anything. I remember going into the theater, and then like I'm pretty sure I was pretty jazzed up walking out of the theater. I can't really remember. I remember I had like a shirt with the Clone Wars poster on it, but it was like one of those like swim shirts where it's like really, really tight. So I had that. That was like my only piece of the Clone Wars movie merch I ever had. So that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching it, and then I don't remember what my thoughts were. I just remember, I saw that in the theater. And
Yeah.
then I got it on DVD that Christmas, and I don't remember ever watching that DVD. So that might have been.
I
what my
never
thoughts
saw it
were
in
at the time.
theaters. I went right to the DVD team, and I watched the movie almost as much as I watched Clone Wars 2003 on DVD. Like, I was
Ooh.
obsessed with it.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in the cinema, and I remember having positive thoughts when I came out of it because like I was just thrilled to get more Star Wars. I was like, oh, I didn't think I'd go and see a Star Wars movie in the cinema again. So it was really cool. And I remember having a more negative view as time went on, and I saw some of the later stories, and I was like, oh wow, it's got so much like more sophisticated in a sense. And there was like certain plot points that I look back on and I was like, that's kind of weird. That doesn't really track. Now though, being more ensconced in like Star Wars like lore, or at least the canon timeline with like, you know, the High Republic books and other stuff, and I'll mention High Republic again a bit later on, but it's really interesting how now the film feels a lot more it feels a lot more the word is eluding me, but it's a lot more entertaining than I thought it would be on revisitation. And it actually, a lot of the plot points I thought were kind of dumb in retrospect, they actually make a lot of sense, and they actually are interesting, like, to consider in the story.
Yeah, my view for this and mainly the first season of Clone Wars in general was like, it gets so much better later on, at least in my view, that I was just always like, you just got to get through this stuff before you get to the good stuff. But there was quite a bit of stuff upon rewatch and actually like sitting down and absorbing it like in a critical eye for the first time in a while. There was a lot that I enjoyed that stuck out. The big thing to start off is the very first thing, that Lucasfilm introduction where you just hear the clones. I don't remember that at all, but I remember being like, oh, what a way to start off. Like,
Yeah.
And then hearing the
Agreed.
Clone Wars fanfare for the first time, I was incredibly like pumped up. Like,
The
here
thing
we
that's
go.
great about hearing those clone voices at the start too is when they brought that back for the Clone Wars season 7 saved trailer.
Oh yeah.
Oh
That-
yeah.
Oh yeah. I was
Yup.
like, where did I
That
yeah.
hits differently now that I
Right?
can make that connection. Yeah. And it also makes it feel more cinematic, and it really gets across the wartime feel, that both that and the subsequent narration from Tom Kane, which I loved hearing each episode. Can we just like start off by like praising like Tom Kane's voice acting and like the awesome kind of like World War II era broadcast type voice that he does for this.
It really
it's
is
amazing. It's
really cool the way they did that. What,
Yeah.
especially with this movie though, that I think is really neat is, like you said, Don, like they really lean into that sort of like historical war feel with a lot of these moments. Like when they arrive on Teth, that is literally like Apocalypse Now,
yeah.
Dude,
Oh
a
yeah.
1970s war film. Like that is
Oh
just
my
so
gosh.
cool how they really leaned into that with this movie that I feel was sort of lacking in the actual series itself. Like it more so was inspired by Star Wars, whereas
Yeah.
this movie to me actually feels like the stuff that inspired Star Wars, which is why I love it so much.
Well, see, that's an interesting point as well, because like, so this, I didn't know, I'd forgotten that this movie that Dave Filoni directs this movie, and there's some cinematography going on that's actually really interesting because it evokes a lot of wartime movies, like you said about the Teth sequence evoking Apocalypse Now, but also the Christophsis battle. There's a lot of shaky cam style shots in a lot of the battle that feel very much kind of like Saving Private Ryan, especially with a lot of the casualties that happen and like some of the more brutal elements that actually kind of surprised me, because like you think that the show gets like darker and more violent later on, but there's actually quite a few like violent and darker moments in just this movie alone.
Well, there's that scene with Jabba when the bounty hunters arrive with the 4 severed heads, and it's like, isn't this
Exactly.
made for kids?
I was
Jeez.
like,
Yeah, I was
"Jeez."
very thrown. I was like, "Whoa!" Like we're just showing that. Okay.
It's like
Back
the
to the
fact that it's-
shaky cam, though, like you
Yeah.
said, it grounds you so much because you have to think, like, other than a couple random pieces, like, you know, the holiday specials and Clone Wars 2003, this was like the first big piece of Star Wars animation that was really like meant for like general audiences, I feel like.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's got to be hard to ground those audiences from a franchise that has almost entirely been in live action. And they actually do a really great job of that by doing like you said, that shaky cam, and there's a lot of like focus changes in various scenes, and like it feels like they actually sat down with actors and shot this. Like it almost like I almost forget I'm watching animation at times, even though it is that kind of caricature and like very not lifelike animation. The cinematography work that they do through this animation is just brilliant and like making it feel real and tangible.
Yeah, and like the final thing I'll add to that is like it actually kind of showcases like Dave Filoni's overall style as a director, which I've kind of noticed now. Looking at both this and the later live action work that he does in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, where he's very clearly drawing from a lot of the stuff that has inspired Star Wars. So there's a lot of like Western influences, samurai influences, and he's very sincere about putting them up there and just saying, yes, look, this is what I'm drawing from. This is the stuff that has inspired this, and this is the stuff that continues to kind of like fuel the kind of stories that we tell in this universe.
He's very unapologetic about that, and that is probably the thing that I appreciate most about Dave Filoni is he really does. He fully embraces like you said, like that Western aspect, that samurai aspect. He goes all in on those sort of things, and I personally feel like that's what I love the most about Star Wars. Is not when Star Wars is inspired by Star Wars, it's when Star Wars is inspired by other things. And that to me is just so freaking cool. Seeing that like mosh pot of just different stories from decades past, like it's just so freaking cool.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the way that they started off with the Christophsis battle is like the perfect opening hook, kind of like how Revenge of the Sith starts off with the battle over Coruscant. Like it's always just ingrained in your minds. Rewatching this, I was like, this is such a really like nice opening battle scene to start off with. You've got your typical like Obi-Wan and Anakin moments that are like defined by the Clone Wars. There was a lot in this that completely mirrored what we see at the beginning of the Siege of Mandalore arc, which I just love looking how it all comes full circle all those years back. And when we get to that, it's just going to be so like sweet to see. We get introduced to Rex and other members of the 501st for the first time, which was great to see because Rex is just one of my absolute favorite characters. It's a really nice battle to start things off. This is, of course, the last time that we see Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, which is upsetting. And as of now, it's the last time we've seen Sam Jackson as Mace Windu, although if he has his way, that'll not...
the way things are going.
Yeah. I mean, my thoughts on that are like flashbacks are fine, but I think that him showing up in the Mandoverse timeline cheapens Anakin's turn so much, and I don't want it. I don't want it.
No, give me flashbacks.
Yeah, if we get flashbacks,
people back from the dead, please.
Yes, please.
The only
I don't
one
want to see
was cool with was Palpatine, but like Maul and all the Maul was the test run.
Maul honestly is the only one I'm okay with. All the other ones that have come back from the dead, well, Boba Fett, I'm okay with it.
Well, Boba Fett's been a thing since like the 90s.
Somehow Mace Windu returned.
And with Boba Fett, I was like, that's such a bitch way to go out. Like, they got to bring him back. And
I was going to say, so much of the Star Wars Legends just had Boba Fett as alive, too.
Yeah.
So it honestly kind of felt like he never actually died when he was never the Star Legend. He was like, he's taking a break. He'll be back.
He was in limbo.
Yeah.
So...
To bring it back to Clone Wars, how wild is it though to hear both Christopher Lee and Samuel L. Jackson's voices coming out of these animated versions? Because like I've seen the show for so long that I got almost used to hearing the respective voice actors. So it's such a surreal experience to hear Christopher Lee. To hear Christopher Lee doing the lines.
I didn't know Sam Jackson voiced Mace until you told me before we started recording, Don. Like, I straight up didn't know. I knew Christopher Lee was Dooku. That's pretty easy to tell, but, like, maybe it's just the way Sam Jackson, like, changed his voice, but, like, it just didn't, it sounded different from what
I feel bad for not knowing the Clone Wars actor's name.
I believe Corey Burton voices Count Dooku. I know that.
Yeah, Corey
Mace, though. The guy that does Mace does a phenomenal job of mirroring Sam
Yeah,
Jackson.
he
Yeah.
does a really.
Terrence C. Carson is his name.
There we go.
Terrence C. Carson.
He does a very nice job. What I didn't know when I was doing some research is apparently before Matt Lanner was cast as Anakin, they approached Hayden Christensen about voicing Anakin in this movie, but they decided to go with Matt Lanner. And that was one of the things I wrote down is there's a couple things that feel off to me about this movie. The animation is one of them. The cinematography itself, like the way the planets look, I love. The way the characters look at points, don't really love. And there are certain points where it just looks very unfinished. Then I'm like, whoa. And I think I realized that was my problem with the movie for the longest time. Wasn't the movie itself, but how it looked compared to the series. But one thing I did notice is maybe it was just because they were trying to experiment with the style, but like Matt Lanner and James Arnold Taylor voice Anakin and Obi-Wan differently in this movie than I feel like they do in the rest of the series.
I
Like
would agree with
Obi-Wan's
that, for
cadence
sure.
is like way different in this one. I don't know if it was just because he was still voicing him how he did in the micro series, but like he's got more of like a high pitched tone to his voice, and Kenobi like it's just a more like a slowed, like relaxed cadence, but it also has kind of like a swagger to it, especially during the later Vengeance fight, which I did like. But
Oh yeah,
there's
fight was
definitely
dope.
some growing pains in development, I would say, where they were trying to figure out how it works. But we get this opening battle, and Obi-Wan starts talking, and he's like, all right, so my new Padawan's arriving. And we kind of see that, he was kind of playing with Anakin, and this was always the plan that Yoda and Obi-Wan had. But
Yep.
real quickly, the alternate universe where Obi-Wan is Ahsoka's master and not Anakin. How
Oh,
would that have turned out?
that was my exact thought when watching the
Ooh.
movie. I was like, oh yeah, imagine if she had been Obi-Wan's Padawan. Like if Obi-Wan wasn't just
wow.
like messing around to kind of like just help the two of them out. What if he'd actually been Ahsoka's master? Like that would have been. I mean, that's like a whole what if story right there that was
Yeah.
just fascinating. Like
You
her
almost
trajectory-
wonder if things may have gone better though, because if Obi-Wan was focused on training Ahsoka, first of all, Anakin
Yeah.
doesn't get attached to Ahsoka. It's easier for Anakin to no longer be as attached to Obi-Wan because he's off with his new Padawan. So he loses two of those very deep connections that sort of fuel his anxiety later on, and you almost wonder if maybe things would have been different.
It just depends on who his master would have been. And like from what we know, again, prequel or Jedi Order,
Yeah.
not really the greatest
Not
in
at
terms
all.
of
No.
hierarchy and emotional awareness. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, my ideal would just be resurrect Avar Chris and have her be
There we
Anakin's
go.
Charge of
master. Because
everything.
like I've said it before, I'll say it again. I truly believe 100% if Anakin was in the High Republic, he wouldn't have turned to the dark side. He
No,
won't.
I mean,
He would have been
absolutely
much
not.
better off.
I think
Yeah.
they at least make it very clear that if Qui-Gon had survived, Anakin's fate would be much different.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it's
I
called
mean,
Duel
that's-
of the Fates for a reason.
exactly.
Well, very
Exactly that.
similar to how Anakin was like, you never would have made it as Obi-Wan's Padawan, but you might make it as mine. That's
Oh.
sort of
That
how
was
Anakin
a
was
quote
with
I wrote
Qui-Gon and
down.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, it's such a poignant moment, that scene. Like, because you've had the whole sequence of them bickering, like while trying to destroy the generator, and then you have, and I think that's the first time you hear Ahsoka's theme playing
Yep.
in the soundtrack.
Yep.
It
And
is.
it was a really effective moment, just because it's that theme has been so well utilized throughout the series that like just hearing it for the first time there was like actually kind of gave me a little chill, to be honest.
What were you
Yeah.
saying, Jake, about I think it was Anakin and Ahsoka or Anakin and Obi-Wan?
Oh, I'm just saying how that moment where Anakin is saying that like Ahsoka's better off being his Padawan rather than Obi-Wan's, that feels very fitting in a similar situation for like Anakin being much more fitting for Qui-Gon's Padawan instead of Obi-Wan's, just because they are very, very different teachers in the way that they go about things. And it's interesting to see how, in that situation, obviously things didn't go right for Anakin, but in the grand scheme of things, things did go right for Ahsoka. She learned a lot by being Anakin's Padawan, and she took not necessarily lessons that he taught her, but lessons that she was able to take from the situations that he was in and the things that he would ultimately do. And that would help lead her to being a much better Jedi later on. So I
Yep.
find that comparison very, very interesting.
Yeah, and to like
definitely.
add to that, like it's Anakin mentoring Ahsoka, getting to see Anakin's dynamic with Ahsoka, starting here and then going through the series. It's really vital, I think, because to understanding Anakin as a character. Because my opinion, or when I started watching the show, was kind of like, oh, actually, I kind of like Anakin now, because I was never like a huge fan of him in the movies, because we often see the movies show his darkest moments, his lowest moments. Like you see him go through immense loss in episode 2 and basically just lose everything in episode 3. So getting to see him more in his element here as like both a capable Jedi and a sound like tactician and warrior who, like, you know, he's a capable commander, but he also knows when to like question authority and to like be a bit more unconventional with like how he engages the enemy. It's really vital towards like understanding him as a character, and it gives like some much needed weight to like his later fall to the dark side and like the tragedy inherent in that you might not have got from the movies necessarily.
It really does. There's a lot of much needed like context that it delivers, I feel like. And while there are certain aspects, and we'll obviously get into this more into the actual discussion when we talk about the series itself, there are a lot of aspects that I feel like the Clone Wars could have done better with Anakin. It really lays into that opening act of Revenge of the Sith, where him and Obi-Wan are trying to rescue the Chancellor, where he's playful yet serious. Then he knows exactly what he's doing, but he doesn't exactly know how to do it properly. And obviously he has the right intentions and is a great warrior, but you know, he almost knocks Obi-Wan's ship off trying to knock the buzz droids off, and they have to crash land. But the Clone Wars really lays into that dynamic of Anakin and Obi-Wan specifically really, really well. And I've always found that to be super interesting about the series, because that to me is like who Anakin wouldn't have been if he hadn't had such dark things happen to him throughout his life.
Exactly. So we get introduced to Ahsoka, and we immediately have those dynamics that become key to the rest of the series, being with Rex and with Anakin. Rex, right off the bat, you know, we get that iconic "You're stuck with me, Sky Guy" line, and you know, Anakin and with Snips and Sky Guy, you know, the ultimate buddy duo. But you just see Rex crack up like right after that, which I love, and it's just the first real moment that the two have with each other. Because, you know, obviously all the talk with Ahsoka at the beginning is, oh, who's this youngling? Which she's 14, which like I always thought younglings were a lot younger than that when I was younger. So that kind of threw me off. But I do want to talk real quickly because Ahsoka gets introduced and I'm like, it's the fucking tube top. And I hate this look so much, guys.
It's horrible. It is so bad.
So much worse after that recent Lucas thing that came out where he's like, no, put her in the tube top. I'm like, no, George, what are you doing? That's a child.
Well, there's like concept art of her that's been floating around the internet for years, obviously, where she's like wearing actual clothing, and it's like, dude, child aside, she's literally going into a war zone. Why is she wearing just a piece of cloth? Like,
yeah.
I mean, that was my exact thought. Like, even like as like a 14-year-old myself, like watching the movie, I was like, that seems a little like skimpy to be wearing into like battle, right? Really, just like a tube top.
Well, that's George's specialty right there. There's a couple of George Lucas specialties, but that we see in this movie, but that's one of them. When she gets the redesign in season 3, it's so much better, and that's
really is.
That's what I picture in my mind when I think of Ahsoka. I don't think of this early. I don't think of this early stuff. But
I saw a great piece of fan art somewhere, and she was wearing a similar outfit, like on the bottom half, with like the skirt and the little like draped cloth piece. but it's like a white undersuit with like a brown reddish robe over top, and she's got like the gloves that sort of mirror Anakin's left glove, and it's just such a better look. Like she just looks more like a Jedi in the prequel era, and I really wish they had gone with something a little
that
bit more
sounds
along those lines.
great. Like I wish they did that.
I would not mind seeing Ahsoka in High Republic mission gear.
I would not mind seeing literally any Jedi of the original prequel era in High Republic Jedi gear.
Yeah, Yarl Poof.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dude, High
there you
Republic's
go.
goated.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan
100%.
in like High Republic gear, just like awesome.
We just need like a side comic where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna, wear the High Republic stuff. I'll be like, all right,
Well,
cool.
speaking on clothing, I feel like I'm probably the only person that thinks this way. But for me personally, when we look back at the Clone Wars, it's like, okay, it's kind of weird that like Anakin and Obi-Wan wore their armor for the first part, and then they just slowly stopped
And they
wearing it
just
in favor
stopped.
of robes.
The budget,
Right.
the budget increased.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I almost like to think, because we know Anakin wears his armored look in the Thrawn novel, which takes place much, much closer to Revenge of the Sith. Personally, I don't like to think that the Clone Wars costumes are necessarily canon, because obviously like the costumes themselves are canon, but when they're wearing them maybe aren't so.
Well, it's a
Like-
case of like, an animated series where, they're always like, oh, why do, animated characters wear the same thing every episode?
Right, because they're
It's
easy to
cheaper.
animate.
Yeah, you don't have to make a whole new model for every
Right. And
single
so I like to
episode.
imagine that they actually do change their clothes a little bit more often, rather than just wearing the same outfit for a year and then change it for another year and then change it for another year. So I'd be perfectly fine if they wanted to quote unquote retcon the tube top in favor of, oh yeah, she was just wearing it like one time and then she never wore it again, but because of the animation budget, we never changed it.
Yeah.
Hmm,
I mean,
let's-
that's a Star Wars retcon I can get behind.
Yeah, I can get behind that one. So we then get to their strategy of breaking down the energy shield and getting off of Christophsis, which I really enjoyed this aspect. There is one portion where they're discussing like the tactics with Rex, and Rex is just straight up. His model's just straight up unfinished for like a.
Oh, yeah.
What
Oh,
the
yeah.
hell is that?
Yeah.
Well, that
It's
happens a couple times though,
bad.
because later on too, Cody doesn't have like half of his marking
Yeah.
for his visor.
Yeah, he
on.
has the viewfinder instead of like the
Yep.
visor that's meant to go over his helmet. I noticed that. I was like, oh wow! And it was like
When-
it goes on for a couple of scenes, I think, before he actually lands on the planet.
When we get to Tatooine in particular, like the whole time Kenobi's on there, I'm like, this movie just looks like a PS2 game. Like it just looks awful at that point in my mind. But I wanted to point that out. But then we get to, Ahsoka and Anakin, they go underneath the crate, which is I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a nice touch. But we get to my favorite scene in the entire movie, which is Obi-Wan's surrender scene and his negotiations with the general.
Oh,
Everything about this. First of all,
Negotiator.
do you have refreshments? I'm like, this
Might we
fucking
have
alcoholic.
some refreshments?
Yeah, this alcoholic over
Get
here.
us something liquid.
It's
Yeah.
my favorite
And, like,
scene.
his
in the whole
name-
movie.
Being General Loathsome, like I've probably talked
That's-
about it before elsewhere. Star Wars is not subtle when it
That
comes
is that.
to
That's
Darth
another. That's another
Sidious,
George
Darth
Lucas.
Plagueis, like the names
Darth
of
Sidious.
yeah, like come on, like it's so like I love that Star Wars is just not subtle with this shit. That's just the one of its gems of it
Yeah.
to me. But like I love it so much. I just need to point that out specifically.
Yeah, I didn't
yeah.
even know that was his name. So that's that.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
George right there.
That's
It's
that's
like
good
Dave,
old
like, all right,
George.
George, what should we name this guy? General Loathsome. I'm like,
Okay.
okay.
General Loathsome.
There we go.
Everybody
I got
around
it.
him was like, great
Yeah.
job, George.
There we
That's
go.
amazing."
Rick McCallum's like, yes, this is the best idea ever. I don't even think he worked on this show, but he's boosting him up. And I wrote, Obi-Wan is the absolute star of the show here.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned his swagger that he has during this movie, the Ventress duel in particular, which I don't know what I was on when I wrote those notes, which we'll get to later, but this is my favorite scene in the whole movie. It's like you're stalling. I was like, well, yeah, I thought the shields would be down by now, and then they blow it up, and he's like, oh, it looks like something happened to your shields.
Oh,
Jeff.
well.
Anakin
I'm
and
like,
Obi-Wan love committing war crimes.
exactly.
One of my favorite Obi-Wan moments in this movie was when he and Rex were their backs were to the super battle droid coming towards them, and they're talking about like what to do to destroy the shield, and like the super battle droid almost vaults over the table, and Obi-Wan just fucking stabs his saber
That's
into
so
the
good,
droid. It's just like, it's so badass. I love it.
Another
Yeah.
small moment I love was one of the clones trying to punch a super battle droid, and, goes,
yeah.
and then I think the
That
battle
was
droid just takes him out.
brutal.
And then
That
I
was
think
brutal.
the one thing I like was on Teth, which we'll get into. That is my Gloop Shido planet.
It looks so good. One of like a note right here. Teth looks awesome. I literally
Dude, my
it
notes
is
are
so cool.
love the opening, love Christophsis, love the plan, love Teth, love the moment where Kenobi destroys the battle droid. The Battle of Teth is the most underrated Clone Wars battle to
It
me.
is so
Oh, for
cool.
sure.
Do
Like,
they
yeah.
go back
One of
to
the
that
best
planet in
ones.
the series?
Dude,
I
same.
don't remember if they do.
I don't think
but
they do.
it
I
is-
don't think the next time we see it is until the Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray.
Yeah,
'cause it is such a cool looking
It
planet
does
with
show
the
up in
jungles
season
and
three.
the purple fog and
Where
now
does
I
it
want
show
to
up, Don?
use it.
It shows up in season 3. It shows up
Oh.
in the episode involving Quinlan Voss and Obi-Wan chasing Zero.
oh no.
Zero the Hutt.
Don't
Oh, when
and
Zero
then-
finally
We're gonna
eats
get
it.
to Zero.
And then is that the episode where like Cad Bane fights Obi-Wan with a saber for like
Yeah.
5 seconds?
Yup.
That's on Teth. That's on Teth.
Dude.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize that was on Teth.
I didn't
yeah, I
realize
know.
that was Teth either, but that is such a great episode that I cannot wait to get into. And
Oh,
that's
for
another
sure.
one. Well, you think about Quinlan Voss, which I mean, I'll talk about this very briefly because we won't get to Voss for a while, but he's one of those characters where he has such a lasting impact, but he only showed up for a single episode, which is
Yeah.
crazy to me. I was like, he definitely showed up in
nuts.
more, and they're like, nope, it's just Hunt for Zero, and I'm like, wow, okay.
That's
And he's
nuts,
one of the
isn't it?
best characters in the show.
I know. So and then Dark Disciple is just great, but you know,
Oh.
that's another story.
For
So
sure.
they blow up the shields, and then Yoda shows up, and I wrote, nice of Yoda to show up right after the shields like go down and after the battle's won. And they're like, your timing couldn't have been better, Yoda. I'm like, I don't know, maybe while the battle was going on would have been great. But we get-
You did not.
We get that quote, which I don't remember which one of us brought it up earlier, but you know, Ahsoka's kind of bummed out, you know, and we get Anakin saying, "You never would have made it as Obi-Wan's Padawan, but you might make it as mine," which I love. That's really the first real moment the two have, and the look on Ahsoka's face after he says that,
It's
it was
so
just
heartwarming.
so heartwarming. And my growing pains with the Ahsoka character when I was younger, I was like, she's just really annoying at the beginning. But it's really only in my mind those first few scenes where this is, and it makes sense because this is probably her first time, you know, on a battlefield like this. It's her first time as a Padawan, so she's like still got that confidence to her. But then there's a moment a couple minutes later, which I just love, which is when she's talking with the clones and telling the battle stories. And Ahsoka's relationship with the clones is one of the best in the entire series. And to see that straight up, where Anakin's like, oh, you know, Jedi are humble. And I'm like, okay, Mr. uses the Force to cut fruit. But it's such a like small moment that I just loved. And another thing I want to point out before we move on is I have this written down a couple times, and it gets more bolded as we go on. But Kevin Kiner's score is so good.
Dude,
It's
his
amazing.
Brilliant.
score for Teth, I forgot the rock music he puts
It's
in
When
for
he
Teth.
comes in with the electric
Yeah.
guitar for the initial assault and Obi-Wan arriving to save the day, I used to have those songs. I bought the Clone Wars movie soundtrack when I was a kid. I had it on my little iPod with like the swivel wheel on it.
Oh,
And I would
yep,
have
know
that
exactly
song
what
on
you mean.
repeat when I was playing with my Legos. That was like always the go-to
Yeah.
song because it's like
I
Star
I got
Wars and
that.
rock music. Come on.
Yeah, I got that in
Yeah.
all caps when it shows up. But another real quick quote: we learn of Jabba's son being kidnapped. Dad of the Year, Jabba the Hutt. throwing the galaxy into chaos. They're assigned to Teth. Obi-Wan is going to try to focus, go to Tatooine and try to figure out it, but Anakin and Ahsoka are going to go to Teth and get the son himself. But Yoda has a proclamation. He says, learning to let go of Ahsoka will be his greatest challenge to master. And that's really the theme of the entire Clone Wars series is Anakin's attachment to not only Padme, but to Ahsoka. And we see the beginnings of this in this movie, and you can definitely see even early on how attached and how much Ahsoka means to him in just a few short days of him taking her on as his apprentice.
I think honestly, because with how you mentioned his attachment to Padme, obviously it's a master-apprentice relationship, so this might be a pretty obvious thing to say, but I just feel like his attachment to Ahsoka was a lot healthier, per se, than his attachment to Padme, which, again, pretty freaking obvious, because, like...
Yeah?
I don't need to say.
Well, yeah, it was much more of a older brother, younger sister kind of relationship, which...
Definitely.
It was great seeing that additional relationship for Anakin, because obviously he had, like, the romantic relationship with Padme, and then he had, like, the father-type relationship with Obi-Wan. And so it was cool to see, because, I mean, we never saw Anakin interacting with any of his, like, pupils. Like, we never got to see Anakin interacting with other Jedi of his age. And so I know that Ahsoka obviously wasn't of his age, but it was more along those lines of, like, they could relate to each other more because they were much closer in age and experience. And so that was a great addition for his character.
For sure.
Anakin's, like, meant to be, like, 20 by the time of this show, which is, like,
Right.
nuts. Yeah.
And she's 14, so they're really not that far off.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like Vanestra Rowe and her Padawan in the High
Imri, yeah, it
Republic.
really is.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of dynamic, yeah.
Yeah.
Before we move on, one thing I was going to mention, and that's like the way Ahsoka saves Anakin from those droids. I liked the Buster Keaton reference. That was very clever.
Oh, another thing I wrote down, this, like, those spinny spider droids, I wish I researched what their actual name was. I'm 99% sure that the plan to take them down in this movie was reutilized in
Book
the
of Boba
Bad
Fett
Batch arc.
Oh, Bad Batch.
Oh.
Yep, the Bad Batch arc from season 7.
Yeah, like 99% sure. I need to rewatch
Because they
that.
even have the callback with the music in that arc.
Oh, that's sick.
That's really cool.
I didn't put that together. I was thinking when they had those giant spider droids, I got Book of Boba Fett finale parallels, but that's a really good point that you bring up.
That's why season 7 of the Clone Wars has to be my favorite. There's so many great callbacks to this movie that really wrap up the whole series really nicely. I just love it.
Yeah. So we get them splitting up. We Anakin and Ahsoka go to Teth, and we get the coolest battle ever. While Obi-Wan goes to Tatooine, and like I said, I don't know if it was just me, but I hate how this movie looks when it's like the bright, like, daylight on Tatooine. The lighting,
when it has the dramatic lighting, it looks great. When it does, like you said, that sort of natural plain lighting, it ends up lacking, like, the dynamics of the real world, and it just looks like objects sitting on top of objects sitting on top of objects.
Yeah, it looks very flat.
Yeah, not a lot of definition.
I know this movie was supposed to be 3 episodes and then they combined into a movie, but did it just not have, like, a feature budget then? And is that why they had these issues?
Well, no, because if you look back at season 1, the animation in this is significantly better than a lot of season 1.
Yeah.
I think they just hadn't figured out the technology at the time.
Yeah.
Like this obviously was very, very new.
Yeah, because I don't know, like, what this movie, like, I don't know if this movie had, like, a rush production or whatever it was, but like I said, there are a couple scenes. It was that Rex scene in particular that really, I was like, oh, okay. But this one was
that Rex. I know exactly which Rex moment you're talking about. Yeah.
Because I like, had to pause for a second. I'm like, let me go back real quick and just watch that again, because that's just, how do you miss that? But the Battle of Teth, it is just everything about it. The Apocalypse Now callbacks, the purple fog, I have Kevin Kiner's score in all caps, as we talked about in that earlier moment. It is such a awesome battle just to watch. But we get introduced to our good buddy Rada the Hutt, the original Grogu, as I wrote down, and he is sick. So Ahsoka
he is
immediately
sick.
sick. He is sick.
He is
Ro-
very
uh,
sick.
Ahsoka immediately has a connection to this little guy. The stinky nickname, we'll debate that, I guess. But I also put down the sounds Rada makes when they're trying to put him in the backpack and like Ventress or the droid is filming them are the most horrifying sounds that my ears have ever heard. And I'm like, you see, they figured something else, something right we hear with Grogu is they have him make the most adorable sounds ever. This guy,
It's horrifying.
what if we
Yeah.
stepped on the kid and then that's the sound it would make?
Yeah, because that's the thing about like Rota, because I he's always been kind of like he is basic with the context of Grogu and the Mandalorian. He's very clearly like Baby Yoda 1.0. Like he was they were trying to
I would
create
say
like a
Baby
cute
Yoda
character.
0.5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
more
one that
more
didn't
like that.
have
Yeah,
him.
and like I think the main reason why he's not as like appealing a character like say cute compared to like Grogu, because even though Grogu does like some gross things like eat spider eggs and frogs and stuff, like Grogu's still like cute and he's sweet. Like one of the first things we see him do is like try and heal Din, whereas like Rota spends most of the Clone Wars movie complaining or like crying or like burping and being just kind of like gross in general. And it's all the more like disconcerting that Ahsoka's like, oh, he's so cute, and then I just feel like I'm Anakin in this situation. Where I'm like, no, he's gross. He's like just a tiny slug thing, gross.
He does have that really funny moment though when they're on the balcony and Ventress is about to break through the door, and he's like screaming at them to look behind you at the other ship, and Ahsoka's like, "Oh, thanks, Stinky," and he's like, "Yeah, no problem."
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That's actually kind of
He
funny.
does have some sort of comedic moments, and like the way he reacts to things, like you think of him as just this mindless slug, but he has like genuine like reactions and like brings attention to certain things. He actually is kind of important to the plot.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I say that he wasn't as appealing, but I would totally love to see him again. Like
Obviously, you can't plaster a Hutt all over every single piece of Star Wars merch ever and get people to buy it because
oh yeah, not
no
like
one's
a
gonna
little
do that.
Yoda.
Right, not like a little Yoda. But yeah,
No.
I really wish we would see him again. It feels weird
Yeah.
that we only ever saw him in this movie,
It felt
especially
very
now that
weird.
Jabba's dead. Like,
Yeah.
I wonder
I
what
thought-
he's up to.
I thought it was a perfect opportunity for him to show up in Book of Boba
Book of
Fett
Boba Fett,
instead
yeah.
of the Hutt twins, but
Yeah.
we never got that, and then the Hutts just kind of disappeared. So maybe we'll get him in the future because Filoni's the type of guy that doesn't really forget characters. So this is
Yep.
a very strange, not inclusion to not have him here.
Which almost makes you wonder if he has some setup for something else.
That's very
Possibly.
Filoni.
Possibly, but we see Ahsoka always immediately have this bond with the Hutt, which Anakin just does not understand, and that's got some really nice moments. But we have Ventress show up, and she interrogates Rex, and I don't know why. Like Rex realistically should have died in this scene. Like I'm
Yep.
glad he did, but Ventress kills every other clone she sees in the series, just doesn't with Rex. So, but Rex had a really good moment where he charges after him after Ventress by himself, which is just another one of those. Yeah, Rex is going to be one of our focal characters because there's that, and then there's a scene a little bit later where he just solos a spider droid and just takes it down by himself. It's like you can tell, like, okay, this is one of the guys we're going to be focusing on in this series. So a nice Rex moment there, but Ventress mind tricks him, and we get Ahsoka and Ventress fighting for about 5 seconds, and then Anakin shows up on a giant insect, and Anakin just diving off that cliff onto the giant, like I wish I knew the name of the species, but the giant flying bug is just another just classic Anakin moment that we come to expect in the Clone Wars, and this is one of the
It feels
first times
very
we see it.
similar to when he's just, if you'll excuse me, and jumps right off the speeder in episode
Yep.
2.
Very much so, yes.
And on the subject of like Rex, like see for me, my headcanon was always that like he actually was able to resist the mind trip because he's not all that weak-minded. Because like the thing is, when you hear like his voice on the comment, he says Anakin, and at first it's like, oh right, yeah, that's Ventress. But then I was like, yeah, but Ventress never refers to him as like Anakin. It's always Skywalker.
Exactly.
And it's like, and I'm like,
Ooh.
you know what?
That
Like,
was the tell. That was
I was
the
like,
tell.
wait, did
Mhm.
he did Rex like actually resist the mind trick, and is he doing that on purpose to alert Anakin? And I was like, wow. And that was the point where I really became interested in Rex as a character, because I was like, oh wow, that might not have happened before with like a clone in Star Wars, that they actually might have demonstrated some mental resistance to something like that. And as we later on see, Rex does actually have a strong mind capable of resisting stuff, if only temporarily.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've never put that together.
That would be another great full circle moment, because again, really is season 7 when we see him resist Order 66, like you said, albeit just for a few moments, but
Yeah.
he's able to do it enough to let those around him know, like, okay, something's wrong. And
Yeah, which no other
that's
clone
enough.
commander does. No
Right.
other clone resists Order 66 like Rex. Just saying.
I know.
Yeah.
Rex supremacy for sure. We get Kenobi arriving on Teth, and we get another one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which is his duel with Ventress. I have that very much bolded here, and again, there's something about Ventress and Obi-Wan is whenever they share a scene together, you can cut the sexual tension with a butter knife.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I'll just
They
read
gonna
some of my
fuck.
notes, because I guess I was also feeling. I said the smirk from Obi-Wan when Ventress takes her skirt off during the duel, the sexual tension in this battle, the Kenobi stance in all caps. I don't know what that's in relation to, but I think it was when he had his pose near the end. But this is such like, for the early Clone Wars like lightsaber duels, some of them work for me, some of them are a bit unremarkable, because animating these super choreographed lightsaber duels, it can be a bit tricky for the new animation they were working with. But this one I really enjoyed. There was a certain moment in the battle, which maybe she's always done this, and I just forgot, but when Ventress combined her two sabers into the double blade, I forgot that was something she did, and I freaked out because I thought that was really cool. This is a really cool fight.
It's super cool. She only does it in the movie. I mean, you see Obi-Wan like sever the lightsaber, so maybe that's like a reason why it never happens again. But yeah, overall, it's a really good fight. The banter between them is great. Like Obi-Wan is just like in peak mode here, just like taunting Ventress, trying to like get her to like slip up and distract her from finding Anakin. It's really good stuff.
There's also a really great callback to 2003 Clone Wars, where when Ventress disarms Obi-Wan and he loses his saber, she goes down for a double overhand swing, and he grabs her wrists in the exact same way that Anakin does so in 2003 Clone Wars. Whereas when Anakin clenches her wrist so hard that she drops her sabers, Obi-Wan just throws her off. And I think that that's really neat to show the different ways that they'll handle situations, because there are moments in this that I feel like they're almost calling back to 2003 Clone Wars.
Yeah.
References.
Oh,
So
definitely.
like when
because
Dooku says to Ventress about like revenge,
Right,
getting
you'll get your
revenge on
revenge.
Skywalker. Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't
it feels
that
like
the original intention too, that this was supposed to be a follow-up to the movie until they ultimately said no?
That's what I thought, but doesn't Ventress die in the 2003 series?
Well, that was retconned right away with the follow-up comic.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I mean, it could be, but there are a couple things that clearly clash. But I think it was originally pitched as either a follow up or like it connects,
supplementary
but we're not
material,
going to like outwardly bring it. Because I know one of the clone commanders from the micro series was supposed to be Rex, but Lucas was like, okay, there's too many characters that start with A in our main
Yeah, they
cast.
wanted to use Ace from the comic that went along with the show.
No, okay,
Or
that's
not
what
Ace,
it was.
Ace. It was Alpha. It was Alpha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
he was
what it,
from
that's what it was.
the Clone Wars comic that was supposed to be like supplementary material to the show. That was the one where Ventress survived the fight with Anakin. Dirge was also in it a ton.
And then Dirge just showed back up recently, and I think War of the Bounty Hunters. So
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he did.
Which that was an interesting decision because is he alive? Is
yeah,
he not?
I haven't read it yet, so I don't know how they used him, but I thought it was just cool that they, made a connection to that show.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's really cool to have him back in canon because he is a
yeah.
weird.
I'm shocked he never
weird
showed up in
character.
this. Like it just
I
Was that
honestly
not
think
also
it's
one
the
of their
animation.
intentions?
Yeah,
maybe
they,
it was.
they kept wanting to bring Dirge in. I believe he was supposed to be the main bounty hunter in Hostage Crisis, but they couldn't quite realize his like unique physiology through the animation because of
This
all the
animation,
tendrils and
yeah.
stuff and the healing. So
yeah, I don't think it would
initially-
have worked. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
picture
They tried
Dirge
to make
in
him
like
human.
Clone Wars animation, and
Yeah.
I just can't. It doesn't work.
Well, when you
Yeah.
have the animation be that very wooden-looking, like caricature puppet style animation, you can't have that like sort of gelatinous, like gooey sort of.
No.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked.
Yeah. We see Ahsoka and Anakin escaping Teth. They're trying to get to the cruiser, and then it blows up, and they're like, "Oh no, Plan B," which I totally forgot happened. But then they gotta go to Tatooine, and the droid is sick. I said, "Shout out to the medical droid hologram, like the laziest doctor ever." Eat this. If it doesn't work, you see a real doctor. I was like.
If it doesn't work, it's not my problem.
It's not my problem. Sorry. Then we got a quick toilet humor moment because you got to appeal to those kids, I guess, George. But I love another thing. We get a lot of nice Ahsoka and Anakin moments, and we really get to see their master and apprentice relationship grow like as the movie's going, like. Which I really appreciated. And there's a lot of really like nice touching moments, especially when Ahsoka's trying to like pick Anakin's brain about going back to Tatooine and his history there.
That's a really great moment too,
Yeah.
because I feel like again it's something that the show as a whole underutilizes, but that really plays on Anakin's like emotional trauma and like his like mental health, and it works so well like in the context of the grand scheme of things, and it's something that I wish the show had sort of delved into a little bit more. But it is really a great moment between the two when she's trying to talk about home and he's doing his best not to let on how much he doesn't want to talk about it until ultimately he yells at her about it. But it really is interesting to like see the repercussions of everything that he's been through on that planet.
Yeah, and also just on an editing standpoint, like the moment when he just thinks about home and you hear like Tusken Raider sound effects. It's a brilliant editing choice, and it's really clever how they're able to kind of intermingle that darker side of Anakin's personality with this more jovial kind of upbeat version that we only saw sort of sparsely in the movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do a really, really great job of that here. Again, more so than I think that they did in probably any other portion of the Clone Wars series. Like it was brilliant the way they wrote him in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. So we get back to Tatooine. It's very clear that we're still seeing a version of Anakin that is Shmi's death is still very new, and it's a new wound, and it's still very much haunting him. Which the callbacks and editing I thought were absolutely great. Anakin crashing that ship is another just trademark Clone Wars Anakin moment that we appreciate and we have to always love. But then we get another thing that I think Don pointed out in our pre-recording chats, that it is very clear when they were editing this movie of when certain episodes were going to start and when certain episodes were going to end. And this is a moment where it's very clear that a new episode was supposed to start when Padme just shows up with 15 minutes left in the movie. And I'm like, oh, hi, Padme. What a look, though. I love this outfit that she's got on when she's first introduced, when she goes into Palpatine's office. It's a really nice look. But we get the Zero subplot. So
I love how stupid Zero the Hutt is. I fucking love his stupidity. It's great.
This is, I mentioned earlier, there are characters that it is very clear that George Lucas created. This is one of them.
Yep.
And it is everything. Literally, as soon as Zero showed up, I put "oh fuck" in my notes. Because again, the only Hutt that speaks English, he's got to have this camp gay stereotype accent to him. And of course, it's like, oh no, but he ends up being Cy Snoodle's lover later on. I'm like, yeah, of course. Thanks, George. That's totally what I pictured. And then him constantly smoking the hookah. I'm like, okay, so that's why this movie got a PG rating. I just, again, some people like Zero. I am not one of them.
No, me neither.
I'm like, now I know why I didn't like this. It's just, I don't know. It's a choice, George, and it didn't fully land for me. But the movie kind of takes a turn because we're like, okay, so Dooku is the reason why this is all going on, and then we got this Zero the Hutt connection, and you can just tell that this was we got to have the Padme-centric episode, which, I mean, I love Padme, so I'm glad she showed up. I just wish she was in the movie for longer than, the tail end of the third act. But I do like the IG droids that Zero has, and they kind of have his, aesthetic painted onto them. I thought those were really cool looking.
It is cool to see, that sort of underground Coruscant mob boss vibe from it too.
Yeah, that's
and,
nice.
Like you said, it definitely has the negative portion of the George effect, but also has the positive portion because it just kind of feels like, all right, first we got your war style movie. Now we're into your mafia movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's a character that only George could create, and there's good and bad to that.
Yeah.
What comes
but at
with
the end of the day, we're all glad that he died.
Yeah, yeah. I think I put they took 3 seasons to kill this guy off.
Yep. I mean, it technically was a couple of weeks later in the actual timeline, but because the first 3 seasons, the chronological order of those are all goofed.
Yeah.
It ended up not being until mid season 3 that he finally dies, even though it was I think chronologically 2 or 3 episodes later.
Yeah. So there is a lot you can discuss with Zero, and we don't have. We could do a whole episode on this guy, but we don't have that kind of time. But we see, Zero, Padme, and Zero. They have their confrontation. Padme is imprisoned. Padme's got her Attack of the Clones Geonosis outfit on, which you can always appreciate. I just love there was one random moment during their conversation where they were talking and they were having a very serious mafia inspired combo, and then there's just a Twilight dancer just going crazy in the background. I'm just like, okay, she's definitely she deserves a pay raise there. But again, you have those, and we see this a lot in the Clone Wars, those seedy Coruscant bars and nightclubs, and this is one of the earliest examples we have. Which I mean, Coruscant is my favorite Star Wars planet, so I love literally everything about it. But again, this was another one of those weird moments. We go back to Anakin, and he's ranting to Ahsoka about sand, and I'm like, nothing changes. And we also find out that R2D2 also does not like sand, so they have something in common, which is very nice. But we talk about great shots. then another really like the inspiration is just soaking through it is that shot of Ahsoka and Anakin with the Tatooine sunset. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
It's great.
They do a great job of, again, the cinematography for this being very, very new animation is just insane. Like the way that they're able to place you into those settings and make it feel like tangible. Like it's really impressive what they're able to do there.
Yeah, and again, I pointed out how during the Kenobi scenes on Tatooine, I wasn't a fan of how it looked, but this and then especially during the Moonlight duel with Dooku, it looks for its time, it looked tremendous.
Mm-hmm. They really they're able to do crazy things with that dramatic lighting. It's just like we discussed earlier, that natural plain lighting just didn't really work for the medium at the time.
But having the nighttime as well for the duel, it really kind of they're able to like bring some real definition to the characters as well. Like when there's a shot where Dooku is looking over to Anakin and trying to manipulate him during the duel, and the lighting kind of makes his eyes almost look black to represent the kind of like darkness that has subsumed him. It's really good stuff. Yeah. And I'll also say, like, having the ultimate tension kind of come down to whether or not Ahsoka can defeat the Magna Guards rather than Anakin beating Dooku. It's a clever choice because that's our main point of tension, because we know Anakin will eventually kill Count Dooku in episode 3, and unless this is like someone's first experience of Star Wars, it probably isn't. But like for most people, the main point of tension is, is Ahsoka going to survive this? Is like, because we know she's not in Revenge of the Sith, so what the hell happened?
So you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, she could bite it in this scene. Yeah. And that was a big theme with, when Clone Wars is airing is, Ahsoka's not in Revenge of the Sith, so that means she has to die before that movie. And
they definitely played off of that a lot throughout the series.
Ahsoka throughout the whole show had stakes to her character because we didn't know her fate.
Yes.
And whereas Anakin, we knew that, he was going to find his way to get out of every single battle. But you made a great moment. I mean, the Magna Guards are another one of my favorite droids, and I loved, that battle. She's up against 3 of them, and she's got to take them out while the Dooku fight is going on. But I loved this Dooku fight too. For one, them using the Force to shoot sand is why have they not done that before? That just looked so cool. But you can there are very few people that I feel get to Anakin more than Dooku does. Like, just gets in his head. And that's one of the moments of Dooku's character that I really like, is he seems to have a way to just trigger Anakin's rage like most people can't.
Well, he has to sort of haunt Anakin in a way, because if you think about it, the Jedi that Anakin looked up to more than anybody was Qui-Gon, and it's like, this is the guy that trained Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
So I feel like that really has to spook Anakin in a way, because obviously he's always seemed to have his mistrusts of the Order. I mean, we see it in Attack of the Clones, we see it throughout the Clone Wars, we see it in Revenge of the Sith, we even see it in that Charles Soule, Anakin and Obi-Wan comic from 2016 or 17.
That's a nice one. I like that one.
Yeah. So to see how he doesn't trust the Order, but at the same time, this is the prime example of someone that has left the Order even on good intentions, and this is what happens to them. So that has to plague him in a way.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. Like, because Dooku is basically like, when you put it like that, he's kind of like the evil flip side of Qui-Gon. He's like that darker kind of paternal figure who's able to kind of stir up like darker emotions in Anakin. And there's also the more like on the surface fact that he severed Anakin's arm. So there's that kind of like personal connection, that kind of violent connection between them, like constantly. Like Dooku bested Anakin in such a horrific way, like he cost him a part of himself. So there's that constant connection between them that's like coupled with like something really traumatic that Anakin had already gone through.
And another instance of, seeing Anakin's rage in full force is when he finally gets to Jabba's palace and Ahsoka isn't there, and he just, takes his lightsaber to Jabba's throat. He's like, "Where is my Padawan?" Which, I mean, we've seen people confront Jabba. I mean, we saw Luke do it, but this is like how he didn't just get immediately shot down by those bounty hunters is beyond me. Like, I think it's just really powerful that, again, only a few short days, if even that, into their relationship of how much he's already cares about her. It's like we see that growth of, I could never have an apprentice to this. It's a very powerful stuff. But then while this is going on, Padme's imprisoned in Zero, and then here comes 3PO with a bomb and some Clone Wars, some clone troopers, which I when the clones showed up, I was like, okay, that makes more sense. But if it was just 3PO with like an explosive to save the day, that would have been absolutely hilarious. But those clones look really cool too near the end, like the red armor.
Yeah, the original Phase 1 Coruscant guards.
Those are really nice looking. I gotta get something of them because those are really nice looking.
They look sick.
Yeah, we find out, of course, Zero, conspired with Dooku to kidnap Jabba's son. All right, go away. And then we see Jabba at the end have the most like mood swing centric thing I've ever seen. So he's like, "Oh, you saved my son. Now you're gonna die." And then Padme shows up on the hologram, and it's like, "No, Zero conspired against him."
Yeah.
And then Jabba's like, "Okay, but the Republic has this treaty, and they can have fair access through Tatooine." And he's like laughing with them and joking around with them. And I'm like, how do you go from such extreme emotions in literally 2 minutes?
I mean, he smokes a lot of spice.
He
So
does
that's
smoke a lot of
probably-
spice.
Yeah.
You saved my son. Now you're gonna die.
Yeah, when you're a 600-year-old mafia boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's where the Padme subplot feels the most extraneous, because you could probably cut that out and it wouldn't necessarily have an impact, but there kind of needs to be that whiplash of like Jabba going, all right, well, yeah, I'm going to kill you now, even though you've saved my son, because you need to justify Padme coming in and being like, oh no, it was your Uncle Zero. The Jedi are cool. Because otherwise, then like it's like has nothing to do with it.
But I would have expanded it a bit more. Like, I wouldn't have just had it be contained to the final 15 or 20 minutes of the movie. Like, I would have had that going on maybe the whole time as we get kind of like a mystery subplot.
More like that Attack of the Clones Obi-Wan detective subplot.
And that's my favorite part of Attack of the Clones. So I think that will work really well to have that clashing, as you have Obi-Wan's story, you have Padme's, and then you have Anakin and Ahsoka's. But then Padme just kind of gets reduced, and again, that seems to be a very common theme with the character, unfortunately. But I really wish she had more to work with here and wasn't with the character that George decided to greet us with. I don't like Zero.
It's Count Dooku.
It's Count Dooku. I'm like, it just doesn't work. Also, Jabba's got a mouth on him because he just screams Jedi Poodoo a couple times. I'm like, stop swearing. There's kids here.
Like Kevin Michael Richardson's voice acting.
I like it.
Jabba.
I like his voice.
It sounds
really
intimidating. There's like a real intimidating resonance behind that voice. Like,
And then
probably the best voice of Jabba I've heard.
The thing I find great is that in the actual Clone Wars series proper, Dooku and Zero have the same voice actor. So that is range right there.
Corey Burton has some range.
What a
like
guy.
Cad Bane, Zero the Hutt, Count Dooku. Like, man, yeah, he's good.
Wow.
For sure. But then that's pretty much it. We end with the binary sunset. Yoda and Obi-Wan show up. We get the, classic Force theme. But it leaves that question is, Rada is such a central character in this film. And I think he has like a background cameo in another episode. And that's all we see of him in the Clone Wars series and really like in the entire timeline. So what's that guy up to? Like, are we going to see him again? Is there a specific thing that you'd like to see him again? If at all applicable, like where do you think, like, where does he end up? Because we know obviously his dad doesn't make it out alive. Did he end up biting in at some point? We just didn't see it, or is he out there somewhere training to reclaim his father's empire from that Boba Fett guy?
So do we know how long Hutts actually live? Because Jabba is hundreds of years old, but we don't know like what their average lifespan is, do we?
I don't think so. So we don't know if it's like a Yoda species type of thing where, like, if during the time of the sequel trilogy, Rada's still like or like a toddler. Like,
well, in Legends,
or,
they
like,
can
a
live up to
teenager.
like 1,000 years. I think. I don't know if that's like a canon thing, but yeah, like I see Rota as like kind of becoming a spoiled Joffrey Baratheon type character. And that would be like how he would fit into like the book, like say a future season of the Book of Boba Fett. But like that's all hypothetical now.
It would be interesting to see how, like, obviously he would have had to grown up away from Jabba because we don't ever see him again. So if he's just like, you know, like you said, lived that sort of spoiled, privileged life, and then just shows up one day like, okay, this is mine. Leave, Boba. Goodbye.
Yeah, I want it, so I'm gonna take it. I've been at boarding school for like decades now.
Right.
I'm ready for my birthright.
I mean, I think it would be cool to see, but we may just never know. He might be one of those just lost in time type of characters.
Yeah, like Jackson the Leppy.
Yeah, but he showed back up, I think.
Kevin Scott is making sure that's not the case.
Maybe 40 years from now, Dave Filoni's son will include Rada in season 30 of the Clone Wars when it gets revived again. Who knows? But that is the Clone Wars movie. Like I said, for someone that has not had, you know, a whole lifetime of positive thoughts towards this movie, but loves what comes after, it was the most I've enjoyed it since the first time I saw it back in 2008 in that theater. I think for the first arc of the show, I mean, maybe less a film, but a first like arc of episodes, I think it's a nice introduction. We get immediately introduced to Rex and Ahsoka. We know those are going to be focal characters. Obi-Wan and Anakin have a lot of great moments. Padme has her stuff. I wish it was fleshed out more. But yeah, it's not as bad as I remember. As a matter of fact, I liked it quite a bit. So I have changed. I thought I was going to be the grumpy old man of this podcast for this episode, but I surprised myself. So I really enjoyed looking back on it. And I know you guys, or at least Connor and Jake, had a lot more positive thoughts going in. So it was probably
I fucking love this movie, man.
I fucking love this movie too.
I actually really like this movie now as well.
I have such a fun time with it every time I watch it. It's like, it's an animated Attack of the Clones for me, where it's like, I just have such a fun time with it. And I can never get bored of it. So...
Yeah. I'm going to echo exactly what you guys have said, because like I also, like Andrew, had like a more negative feeling towards it for a while, but just like coming back and seeing it here, I had a lot of fun with it, and it's like I just really enjoyed it, and it's just a really nice like setup for everything like awesome that's like to come with the Clone Wars.
It's a fun time, and
it's
just something I want to say real quick. Disney Plus, make more animated Star Wars movies. Just do it,
please.
It is such a good opportunity for stories. When before season 7 got announced, I was like, okay, I think they need to do Siege of Mandalore on Disney Plus as a film. And then like 2 days later, they announced season 7. So I'm like, all right, I predicted it. Because there was like no like hint that they were going to revive it, at least none that I caught. I just think that it would be such a nice opportunity not only to tell like those unfinished stories like the Crystal Crisis Utapau arc, but also like literally anything you can tell in a medium. And like if you have certain stories that you want to tell, but you're like, oh, I don't know, like if this would work in live action, make a animated movie about it on Disney. I just don't get why we're not getting straight to Disney Plus films like this more
It would
than
make a lot of sense for a lot of those remaining Clone Wars arcs because what was it? They had like 42 episodes that had
Yeah.
reels and stories, and then they only released 12. So
Jeez.
obviously, I'll never sit here and complain, be like, "Oh, they need to give us more," because
we have 7
Like,
seasons worth.
I
Yeah.
would
Right,
love to see the
7
anime
seasons.
those
But at the
arcs.
same time,
Same.
Disney, we know how you guys operate. You'll do anything that'll make you guys money. Just release the freaking arcs as movies. It'll make you money.
You know
Dark,
that.
Dark
people are
Disciple
gonna eat
movie
it up.
when?
Literally,
Yeah. I mean, that's a
that would
that's
be
a story
killer.
waiting to happen. Or if you just want to adapt like some of the like comics or novels or something, it's just such a perfect form that I wish that they
Bro,
took
Son of
advantage of
Dathomir
more.
is already an S tier comic. Would not mind seeing it in Clone Wars season 7 animation.
I mean, yeah,
Definitely.
You put Maul right there. He's one of the most popular characters. People will just eat that stuff up, and there's such a dedicated portion of the fandom that just loves all of the animated stuff to begin with. And I just think, I mean, maybe it is in development. We just haven't heard about it, but I just think it's a format that they are just missing the boat on, with really not just Star Wars, but like all of their properties. I mean, to be fair, Disney Plus is still a relatively young service, but I just think it makes all the sense in the world to tell more stories on there, not just in these shows, but get some movies on there. I think it would be a really nice idea. That if someone is by chance listening, take my advice, please.
Take all of our advice.
Take all of our advice.
Give us more animation. It's the better Star Wars.
Yeah.
I know there's like 3 people from Lucasfilm that follow me, but they're not going to listen to this. But if they do, use your power, use your influence, whatever you got to do. Give us more animated Star Wars. Matt, I know you're like the GOAT to me when it comes to animated Star Wars. Would not mind seeing you do more animated Star Wars projects. So just putting it out there.
I mean, Justin Ridge, who was I think the showrunner of Resistance, followed me on Twitter at one point. Doesn't anymore. But if you want to hit follow again, listen, you can make some really cool stuff. But I think that's where we'll wrap things up. Let me tell you guys, I have been looking forward to getting this off the ground for the longest time. And I mean, we started with a hefty movie, so there was a lot to discuss. But I think for a first episode, I had a blast, and I cannot wait to do this again.
Same. Yeah, I've been looking forward to like hanging with all of you and just like kicking this off with the movie, and just like I'm really jazzed to like see where we go from here and like see how we all feel about all the following arcs and stuff, like especially stuff like Rookies, Obi-Wan, Undercover, all of that stuff. Oh, so exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to just talk animated Star Wars because like even though I grew up with Clone Wars, Rebels is just I resonate way more with it. And so I kind of like push Clone Wars off to the side, both for myself and both because this fandom likes to overrate everything. And so me being the sort of contrarian that I am, I just decided to be like, yeah, this isn't as good just to spite this fandom. So being able to get back into Clone Wars, which is going to take a while, will be fun. It will be a good time.
It's going to be a fun time.
And when we finally get to Resistance, I'm never going to shut up.
I need to still watch season 2.
I need to watch Resistance.
Is so fun.
I
Season
love
2,
Resistance.
I have things, but season 1 it was a blast. But yeah, so next time we're going to get into the actual series itself. Like we talked about before we started recording, it is a bit difficult to kind of group some of these early standalone episodes together. So we're going to figure that out beforehand. But then after that, we have the Malevolence arc, which that'll be our first true story arc of the show. So we'll get that to you hopefully soon. I'm hoping that we'll have a schedule more set schedule at some point, but I know it's going to be a bit hectic for all of us in the next coming months with like work and school and stuff. Is at least in my case, I'm trying to finish up everything right now. So episode 2 will be coming hopefully fairly soon, but hopefully around the summertime we'll have a more set schedule that we can stick to. And once we get a groove going, I think we'll definitely have something figured out. So before I sign off, guys, what can we check you out on? Do you got anything coming down the pipeline?
Check out the SWEU.
Oh, for sure.
We all write for it in various capacities.
Definitely.
Yep, absolutely. It's a great community to like be a part of, and like the stories that are all coming are like really exciting. Just speaking personally, I have a Twitter handle at Donovan Mead. That's my Twitter handle. And I also have a Donline Dude YouTube channel. Not a lot of content on there like right now, but I'm working to change that.
So for me personally, you can find me on Twitter at Depa Banana, where I talk Star Wars and other stuff. I also co-host another podcast called the Nerd Academy Podcast, where we talk everything in nerdom, specifically the Star Wars show, which is Knights of the Nerd Republic. Episodes release Sunday at noon every time we have one. We do news, theories, interviews, hoping to get a few dope interviews in soon. And yeah, I'm also part of the SWEU. I write articles on the website. I also am in the process of writing a few stories. You can pretty much figure out. I have 2 stories coming in August about an established character, and I'm pretty sure y'all can figure out who it is. You can find all that at sweditorig.com and sweditorig.com/SWEU. We have some stories published already by some great creatives that Jake, and Don have worked with for over a year or 2. And it's just such a fun fan universe because we keep to the canon while also adding our own stuff to it.
Yeah, what Connor said.
Also what Connor said.
Yeah, it's a really nice community. I am not a part of the story group at the moment, but I have been writing articles since I think we're going on 2 years, and it is just such a nice community, such a welcoming, fun group of Star Wars fans. Join that Discord if you haven't yet. It is such a great time, and we'll for sure get Austin on here at some point to gush about Clone Wars with us, because we'll have a great time. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Starlight Andrew. I'm hoping to get a Twitch up and running fairly soon, in time for the new Lego Skywalker saga, because I want to make some content with that. But yeah, thank you all for listening to the first episode. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you continue on our journey down the rabbit hole of the Clone Wars with us. So, thank you for joining us. May the Force be with you for light and life. See you guys next time.